Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Emily Kane, Director of Operations for BlastPoint. Today, we are with our friend, franchise consultant, Dr. Ben Litalien, who is going to talk about optimizing franchise territory allocation for performance and results. Before I introduce Ben, I've got news and some orientation information to share so everyone knows how to participate today. First, if you haven't signed up already, please join us for the Blastcast. The Blastcast is our semi-weekly email newsletter to capture and highlight the growing edge of the franchise industry. If you're deeply invested and passionate about franchising, or if you're brand new to this industry, either way, the Blastcast is designed to bring you the most relevant information you need to make sophisticated choices for your business. We know that business is all-consuming, so we're trying to make it simple for you to get the latest straight to your inbox. Sign up is available on our website, blastpoint.co, and will be included in the follow-up communication to the webinar. Next, participation. You can submit questions for Ben through the Q&A channel. We have dozens of people in attendance today, and I'll do my best to get as many questions as possible. If we don't get to your question, please forgive me. If you're having technical difficulties, please notify our team through chat, and we have extra staff on hand to help troubleshoot. Both the Q&A and the chat options appear at the bottom of the screen in mobile or in the desktop applications of Zoom. And now, onto the fun stuff. We are all here to meet Dr. Ben Litalien. Today he's going to talk about territory allocation and franchising and network optimization. And Ben, I think that turns it over to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, well, thank you very much. It's great to be here. I appreciate everyone taking a few minutes out of their busy day to join us to talk about a very important topic in franchising. For those of you who don't know me, I've been in franchising for 30 years. Amazing, I look so young. I started at a young age. Anyway, I have built and sold 4 franchise businesses. I ran ExxonMobil's franchising on-the-run convenience stores for the U.S. And using network optimization as a model, which we'll talk about later, we were able to develop a pipeline of over 1,000 units in just 4.5 years. So it's a very important process if you want to grow quickly and efficiently. I'm also a certified franchise executive. I hope that many of you who are participating are already CFE or working on your CFE through the International Franchise Association. To learn more about that, you can go to www.franchise.org and look at the Certified Franchise Executive Program. I spend a good majority of my time consulting with franchise companies as large as IKEA or Remax, and then with as small as startups. So all different aspects of franchising. I also teach at the University of Maryland, University College, and Georgetown University franchise courses, and you can Google those if you want to learn more. And I have a doctorate in management with my dissertation on social franchising, which is one of my passion areas. Having nonprofits engage in the franchise sector. If you want to learn more about that, reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you more about it. But let's dive into our topic for today. We're going to talk about allocation of territory. And as you can imagine, this is a critical consideration, particularly on growth. The reality is your inventory as a franchisor is territory. It's scarce. Once it's gone, it's gone. And if you're not real strategic about how you allocate it, you wake up one day and realize that you've maybe sold off a large section of your available inventory with limited opportunities to do anything about it. So what I want to share with you is some thoughts today around if you're an early stage organization, how to give some deep thought to this topic in advance of ending up in that situation. If you're a more mature franchise and you already have a significant number of locations, want to talk a little bit about how you can right size your organization over time. So let's dive in. We have limited time. We want to be cognizant of your busy schedules. So first of all, the question you should ask is, do you need to grant the territory? It's not required. Matter of fact, nobody really regulates how you franchise, just that you disclose it from a federal standpoint. And several states have some other various regulations related to offering and selling franchises. But by and large, no one is providing franchisors with information about what you must or do or not do with regard to your franchise offer. So it's really a choice each franchisor needs to make relative to their franchise offer. Do you need to grant a territory? In some cases, your concept may not require it. For example, InExpress. If you're not familiar with them, you certainly can Google them, but they're a reseller of DHL, overnight shipping, internationally, small parcel, and other logistics services. And their model is really customer focused. Wherever you as a franchisee can acquire a customer, you're free to service them. So they're not burdened with the complexities of granting a territory. Because once you grant a territory, it has to be monitored. It has to be maintained. Otherwise, you end up with channel conflicts. For example, when you grant a territory to someone and they find another franchisee operating in that territory, maybe marketing in that territory, you find yourself in the unenviable position of being the mediator of those conflicts. And so if you can avoid granting a territory and it's just open and based on where a franchisee finds a customer, then you can avoid a high level of complexity relative to your offer. So let's assume, though, that you can't avoid that. Your concept needs territory. When you grant territory, it creates a cap on your expansion and growth. And as an example, I list here, there's 51 cities in the U.S. with 1 million or more in population. So notionally, if you had an offer that was designed with a territory in mind of 1 million or more in population, then you would only have to focus on finding 51 franchisees. Now, that may sound odd, but in fact, it's one of the more rapidly growing strategies in territory allocation. I have several clients that use a tiered model where they have a particular type of franchise that they use in cities of 1 million or more in population. This can be called area developer if the developer is going to own and operate all the units. I call it a regional developer when it's combined with the area representative model, which allows that regional developer to own and operate units, but also to solicit independent franchisees on behalf of the franchisor. This can be a way to grow rapidly in larger markets. Outside of those markets, a more traditional single unit, if you will, single territory franchise, owner operator franchise can be used in some 300 second tier markets. And then even having a micro franchise model in urban or rural markets. If you look at the UPS store model, for example, they have a hometown for markets of 12,500 in population. So what we're seeing is the market being allocated in sectors based on the opportunity. Metro markets, definitely a different opportunity than second tier markets or tier 2 markets. Definitely a different opportunity than a rural market. So when you think about territory allocation, keep in mind there's no one size fits all. Matter of fact, in most concepts, going through an analysis of the various market segments that you're looking at, whether in the U.S. or abroad, and then creating a strategy for each one of those might yield you a better territory allocation than simply picking a number of households or a number of population number or some other denominator that's been traditionally used to allocate territory. Now, having said that, another key issue to consider is underperforming franchisees. Once a franchisee is given a territory, whether exclusive or non-exclusive, they have rights. You've granted them as a franchisor rights. And that may preclude you as the franchisor and certainly others within the network from competing with them in their market, offering other products and services, which is all well and good and can be part of a dynamic territory allocation strategy. But how are you going to deal with the franchisee who may get their sales to a level that they're happy with, but that is woefully lower than your expectation? Now, your expectation may be based on, pie in the sky or blue sky or what you think, but increasingly it should be based on some clearly articulated and definable metrics. For example, market penetration, your brand in that market. How are you measuring market penetration, and how will you be able to gauge your franchisee's performance against that? Using this type of datum, you're able to begin to consider performance targets within your franchise offer, so that franchisees who underperform may still maintain a part of a territory, but might not be locking you out of the entire territory. And there's numerous examples of how this has happened with various companies over time. The one that comes to mind most readily is Snap-on Tools, who would take a mechanic, finance them into a delivery vehicle, and give them a fairly large territory with the eye towards selling a certain amount of tools to the known mechanics in that market. And unfortunately, the franchisees achieved a level of satiation or satisfaction well before they penetrated the full value of the market for Snap-on. And Snap-on knew this because they would get phone calls from mechanics who were underserved or not served in a territory, and the franchisee was reticent to take on more days, more time, more effort. So this is a critical consideration in territory allocation. How will you deal with underperforming franchisees? The main thing to think about with territory allocation and franchising is you're not going to have all the information you want to make good decisions early on. And so you have to have a mindset of learning quickly and adapting. So that having said that, your first franchisee may have a much different size or territory allocated to them than your 10th franchisee. If with each franchise that you're opening, you're learning and you're adapting, how many houses does it take to support a successful business? How many mobile units does it take to support, or what other metric that you're using to identify? And in the past, since I've been doing this for 30 years, we had very rudimentary tools available. As a matter of fact, most of us simply used a map, and we chose either counties or highways or state boundaries in order to create what we felt like was a reasonable opportunity for a franchisee to own a franchise and seek their fortune, if you will. And over the past decade, for sure, there has been a tremendous increase in the number of tools available. And so I'm really excited to be presenting BlastPoint to you today because I have been working with them with several clients, and I think that what they have to offer is very valuable when you're thinking about properly allocating your territory. So let's move on and talk about briefly two different types of allocation. The first, of course, is unit-based, and this used to be the predominant methodology. And that was because most franchises were physical locations, unit-based. And so, it's a brick and mortar, it's a physical location that I'm going to go to every day, that I'm going to work from. And so allocating territory based on what is a reasonable proximity to that location a franchisee should expect, or a franchisor should expect, a sufficient number of customers to be serviced from. So using that as a map, we would then try to lay out markets based on a few key factors. Number one would be incumbent competition that's in the market. Can we go in and see who's already there in our space that we're going to have to go in and compete with? And of course, if there's more competitors, then that's less attractive than if there's less competitors, which might allow a franchisor to increase the size of the target. It also might be based on how quickly we want to develop a market. Again, this is going to require using different types of franchise models like area developer, regional developer, etc., even area representative. And again, when you're using unit-based as a franchise territory allocation model, you also must plan for underperforming. How are you going to deal with a location that either because of the franchisee's unwillingness to perform at a higher level and grow, or the market reality is keeping it from growing? How will you deal with that? Again, if you've allocated the territory based on one set of data, and then that data changes, i.e. the number of competitors, changes in the marketplace, etc., do you have the flexibility built in to reallocate territory? Now, if you already have a mature brand and you've already allocated territory and you're pretty much stuck with what you have, what can you do about it? Well, number one, hopefully in your renewal, you reserve the right to require the franchisee to sign a then current franchise agreement and have terms that can be materially different than what they had originally. If so, then in this case, you would be able to reallocate territory in the renewal process. Now, you may in some states run into a challenge where a franchisee might appeal to the state to say, hey, this isn't fair. I paid for this territory. I'm renewing now. They're reallocating it. So the good news is there's only a few registration states. In most places, this won't be the case. But renewal is one time where you can right size your territory allocation based on current information. Another is when a franchisee is asking for something from the franchisor. When a franchisee asks for royalty relief, for example, because maybe they're struggling, and probably because they have a large territory that they're not capturing. These things often are related. But when a franchisee is asking a franchisor for something that is not, they're not required to provide, then this is an opportunity to say, I may be willing to do that if you're willing to reallocate your territory. So whenever a franchisee is asking for something that the franchisor is not required to provide, you may consider providing it, but tying it to an agreement to reallocate the territory. These are two of the ways that you can begin to right size. A third way would simply be to go strategically to franchisees who are not capturing market share and talk to them about opening up additional market space within those territories. Again, the premise being with more franchisees in the market, better branding will be developed, more economy of scale, lower cost of marketing, et cetera. If they can see the value in that, they may be willing to consider. So that's unit-based, which used to be the predominant model. Now we move to service-based, which today is the largest segment in franchising. So the next slide there, service-based, basically you're talking about penetrating a market, trying to create brand preference. The example you see here with the ZR Wand is, with the carpet cleaning franchise, the customer obviously is not coming to you. The franchisee is going to go to the customer. And so how do you allocate territory based on a service being provided? Well, in the first case, it's going to be based on the service that's being offered. In the case of carpet cleaning, of course, you have both residential and commercial. So decisions will need to be made. Am I going to allocate territory the same way? And if so, what kind of challenges might I have? If you allocate territory under the commercial application, you may run into problems with businesses that cross over territory lines. For example, if you have a bank in a certain market that has 40 locations, some of which may be in one franchisee's territory, some in another, it's very difficult sometimes to work with a commercial client who wants to have to deal with two separate franchisees. So something to keep in mind is when you're looking at service-based territory allocation, you need to decipher between how am I going to deal with commercial customers and residential customers. Oftentimes, it will require two different strategies. On the residential side, it likely will be homeowners for the service that you're providing. Now, it's not reasonable to assume you're going to get 100% of the potential customers in a market due to some customers not wanting the product, some are service, incumbent competitors who are going to be likely price sensitive to your coming in their market. And so a franchisee is going to need a reasonable market penetration goal, and then that can be backed into. So if you want to end up with, over time, a 20% penetration in this market, how many homes would be reasonable? And what do those homes look like? Again, going back to learning and adapting. With every new customer your franchisee takes on, you should be tracking what's the value of that home? How many people live in that home? How long have they lived in that home? Do they have pets? What services did they ask for? So that you're learning and putting that data into a system like BlastPoint that can help you calculate out how many of those types of homes are represented in any market so that you can more accurately allocate territory as you grow your data. So service, again, it's based on what type of service that you're providing, who the customer is. It's really a study in customer segmentation. Who's the likely customer for your service? How many of them are in the market? And what's a reasonable percentage for you to capture? This would be a strong formula for building a territory allocation model. Now, as you build that model, again, in your franchise disclosure document, you can disclose that you use a formula. The good thing about that is the formula is going to create unique territories for each franchisee based on the actual results of running the formula. So in the past, what we've seen mostly is franchisors locking themselves down to a denominator, 300,000 in population, or 75,000 homes, or the county of Hoboken, whatever. And so, but this is not an efficient way to allocate your most precious inventory in a franchise system. So in the service-based franchise, think about creating a formula that you can apply data to and that you can get smarter with every new franchisee and every transaction that they have. Your formula is going to get better and better at predicting what the proper size of the territory should be. So all of that to lead us to what I really want to emphasize today on territory allocation on our next slide, which is network optimization approach. Now, network optimization approach has been around for a long time. I ran into it at ExxonMobil, and it has been used in the oil and gas industry very, very successfully for decades. And they will go into a market and they will run very, very sophisticated modeling to determine what that market should look like at maturity, no matter what stage it's in today. And they go so far as to land bank locations in areas where there's no development yet. They model how the city is growing, in what area it's growing, in what direction it's growing, and they will literally go and buy vacant land where they believe major roads and major intersections are going to be going in the next 20 years. And they will land bank that in order to get the premium hard corner in the key intersections for their gas station. So this modeling technique is very powerful, and it's why I'm excited for you to learn more about BlastPoint, because I find that the way that they work, the way that they think, and the tool that they use provides an excellent way for any franchisor, whether unit-based or service-based, to look at a market, whether an existing market or a new market, and determine what's the optimal territory allocation at maturity. Meaning maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 10 years. It may depend on what franchise model you're using. If you're going to do them all single unit or single franchisee owner operator, or whether you're going to have an area developer model, regional developer model, area representative model. So those types of tiers will have an impact on your network optimization approach. The beautiful thing is you can plot, if I went in this market and I use these three models, a single unit, an area developer with an area rep, what would it look like at maturity? How would I optimize the territory? Again, keeping in mind inventory in franchising is territory. It's scarce. Once it's gone, it's gone. And so to the extent you can look at a market and evaluate today, what is the optimal way for me to build out that network for that market? Stronger decisions can be made around exactly who am I looking for as a franchisee in all different levels, and where should I put them? When you're going to Oklahoma City, for example, where should you put your first unit? The data should be driving that decision. Franchisors should become evidence-based decision makers. We should be looking at that market, doing network optimization, and determining what is the best allocation of the Oklahoma City territory and what type of franchise should we be using. This gives us the opportunity to lay out a strategy that can maximize our potential for our brand development, to help us focus our resources more efficiently and effectively, and to achieve optimal network saturation more quickly. So, a lot to think about when you talk about territory allocation in a franchise context. But I'd like just to stop there for a minute and let BlastPoint tell you a little bit about themselves and what they do and how their tool works, and then I'll come back with some final thoughts.
So I'm back on, and Ben, I hope that while I'm talking about BlastPoint, you'll weigh in too and just tell me what you're seeing, because I just took away so much from your part of the presentation, and I'm going to try to keep up with you. And I hope I do. Okay. So BlastPoint is a software technology that's about 3 years old at this point. And we started working with people in the franchise industry around 2 years ago and discovered that we had a lot to offer in the franchise industry. And it's been a really wonderful learning experience to get to know this industry. And today was no different, Ben. I just learned a lot, so thank you so much. So some of the value we add to franchisors is that we help them take a smarter, more evidence-driven approach, as Ben was describing, to territory design and management, to franchise sales, in using our platform as a part of their sales process, in local marketing, in prospecting and recruiting, in site selection, customer analytics, and competitive and co-tenant analysis. Today, I'm really going to focus on the topic at hand, which is optimizing franchise territory allocation, and competitive and co-tenant analysis does come up when that's what you're thinking about. So one of the things Ben was talking about, especially when you're dealing with separate or disparate kinds of franchising models, was really building a territory allocation formula or a model that fits your specific business. The slides I'm going to show today relate to a childcare franchise that we are working with, but I'm going to walk you through what a model might look like. Something that's really, really important when you're trying to optimize location is that you've done some of the work that Ben is describing in terms of continuously learning and adapting your model to who you are learning your actual customers are. We have had multiple experiences in this industry of learning that our customers may not actually know yet who all of their customers are. So that data-driven model that Ben is talking about is really empowered and made more useful when you walk into this process knowing that part of your job to get smarter at building optimal territories is to be gathering data about the customers you already have, the customers that are already using your business. In our case, for today, I started off by heat mapping number of households, children 5 and under, children ages 5 to 9, and childcare services already in this area. Our technology walks you really, really quickly through being able to make visual media out of huge disparate data sets. So we use plain English querying and a map-based interface to take what used to be really painful questions to answer for yourself and allow you to answer them really rapidly. Within a few seconds, I was able to generate this heat map that really shows us, and this is Pittsburgh, this is where Blast Point is located. The heat map really shows us where the hot spots for something like a childcare facility would be in our region. I drew this map up using zip codes, and I'm going to get into how our tool helps you really flexibly, depending upon your model, build territories around the customer demographics that are relevant for you. So in this case, it was children and density of competitors and density of households. In our tool, you have a variety of choices about how to draw shapes on the map that you allocate as territories. Some of our customers use an approach to designing territories that is completely linked to zip codes. Some of our customers draw custom territories every single time they write a new franchise agreement. Some of our customers use whole states or whole regions. And because in franchising, the way territories are developed is so integrally linked to your business model, we have built a lot of flexibility into this tool in terms of how you actually draw those territory shapes in the tool. So in this case, I've chosen zip codes as my method for drawing this particular territory, and I'm going to use my cursor to sort of highlight this, but I selected the hottest zip codes for the factors I was searching for, the zip codes that had the most relevance when it came to household population and children 0 to 5, 5 to 9. Our tool also allows you to evaluate regions layer by layer. So once you've drawn a territory, and those are all of the zip codes included in this territory that I've drawn. Once you've drawn a territory, you can move through the tool and remove visual layers that aren't relevant as you spend a little bit more time investigating. So that's an image of just the territory I drew over a few minutes today, actually, after I talked with Ben this morning. That's one of the benefits of using a technology like this, is that it allows you to do some of this mapping work much more rapidly than previous alternatives, and much more rapidly and in a customized way than previous alternatives. So the other piece that Ben talked about was utilizing competitor and co-locator data. And that's something that newer technologies do allow you to add into your maps easily and with a high level of customization. In this particular map, I've done a few things. Some of them are special features of our newest territory management tool. One of the things I've done is I've added some of the competitor locations that are relevant to the brand that I'm scouting territories for. The other thing that I've done is I've taken the zip codes that we already knew were hotspots for our business model. And within our tool, you can actually drill down further and further and further and get a little bit more granular. I'm gonna move on to the next slide to show you that. And you can break maps up into smaller and smaller pieces and heat map smaller and smaller fragments of the map. So I took the zip codes and layered over the top of our zip code territories are actually census block groups. Those larger shapes you see on this map are census block groups that are heat mapped right now. And what that allows me to see is that there are some areas within this zip code that was really useful in our model. And maybe if you were a mature franchise brand, this is a zip code that you've already allocated away as a territory. And I've been able to heat map and really drill down and see, even within that zip code, there are smaller clusters of hotspots for my particular business. This area right here, the area labeled Ohio Township, those are key hot areas that I shouldn't neglect and I should really give my attention to and do further data extraction or reporting or just investigation. One of the ways our customers are using this tool is to do a lot of the scouting and investigation of regions that they haven't allocated yet before they actually get there. So we've had some fantastic success with a completely different kind of franchising model that is a service-based franchise in using our tool to scout out regions of the country where they don't yet have a presence, in launching their brand in those regions and knowing exactly where to go and where to launch. So the last piece about using some of the newer technologies in location analytics in trying to optimize territories is that you want to look for a tool that offers you a sandbox. One of the things that I heard Dr. Ben talk about several times in this webinar was taking on a mindset of learning and adaptation, of really being an operator who asks the right questions about your business so that you can be driving your business further and further and further into a data-driven model. One of the things that our tool does offer is the ability to play around with the layers of visualization, whether it's heat mapping or competitor or co-locator locations, or even playing around with the shapes of your territories until you feel like you've got something that's really, really workable for your model. Ben, as I'm pushing through these slides, is there anything that you've seen here that you want to go back and highlight or touch upon?
No, this is perfect. This is what I was eager to share with others. I think that these types of tools have just been elusive in franchising. They've been in other sectors, and I know that BlastPoint has a huge presence in the energy sector, and there's other. But to get them down, get this type of capability down to where it's affordable for even an emerging franchisor is really just amazing. The amount of intelligence that you can have that's very specific to your franchise offer is really amazing. So no, just keep going. This is perfect.
So I've talked through most of my slides about territory allocation. Obviously, I did have a little bit more to say about what our value proposition for franchises is, and there are other ways that operators in the franchise industry are using our tool right now and having a lot of success. I'm checking the time, and I think it's almost time for us to start taking questions. But before we do that, Ben, can I turn this back over to you? And if there's anything that you want me to move back through in the slide deck, let me know.
No, great. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. It was a good, brief glimpse at how quickly the information can be laid out, pulled together. I'd say the thing that's the most impressive for me is that, unlike most of the software that I've been exposed to, either clients have had or whatever, they controlled everything. In the case of BlastPoint, it's a subscription. You literally have access to the platform 24/7. You can run as many scenarios as you want to run. You can try different types of formulas. It just is, it's a game changer. And so it was a really good first glimpse for our attendees, and hopefully they'll avail themselves to, being in touch and getting a full demo of the software when they have time. So let's move on with some final thoughts on territory allocation, and I'll finish up my educational component of your webinar today, and certainly open up the floor to questions. I know there's been one that I've answered that's come across, but please, if you have any questions, drop those in the Q&A box, and we'll dive into those in just a minute, and we'll be sure to get you out of here by 3 o'clock. So some final thoughts. Just when you think about territory allocation and franchising, you also have to think, does it need to be exclusive? I've seen numerous cases where exclusive rights were granted, but they really weren't necessary. And in some cases, they were detrimental to the brand. When you grant a franchisee exclusive rights, you have to be really, really clear of what's included. For example, not too long ago, Auntie Anne's Pretzel began selling frozen pretzels in grocery stores. And they had to go through a fairly lengthy process of evaluating, did we reserve the right to do that in all of our franchise agreements? Did we unnecessarily grant exclusive rights that now locks us out of coming into a franchisee market with another product or service? So this is a really, really important consideration. If you don't need to give exclusivity, you shouldn't burden yourself with it, because there's really limited upside and lots of downside. In some cases, you may have a very strong reason for granting exclusivity. Make sure that it's very limited and it's very specific, so that you don't cut yourself off from opportunities that you might not even be aware of today. You certainly want to have a provision in every franchise agreement that clearly states that any right not expressly granted is reserved to the franchisor, to try and avoid conflicts in the future. Now, things are going to change. Things have been changing rapidly. We're in a period of unparalleled change. In the 30 years I've been in franchising, the last 5 have eclipsed the prior 25 in the velocity and magnitude of change. So what does that mean? It means we need to build flexibility into our models in every aspect. And territory allocation should probably be at the top of the list. Again, a formulaic approach allows your territory to shift based on demographics, competitive movement, underperformance, regulatory issues. These are all things that we can try and predict, but we're not going to know until they actually happen. So you need to have a model that can flex based on what's going to change over time. And I put this under the heading of virtual rights, but it may be too narrow even at that. That there are new industries, new sectors, new things happening. When you think about when the internet came on board, it revolutionized retail, because now we're not only working with our physical location, but now we have to deal with people wanting to order from us and have it shipped. And so thinking about the more recent virtual change is Amazon. And the phrase that keeps being used is your business Amazon proof. It's not likely that Amazon's going to get into dentistry, but there are dozens and dozens of sectors in franchising that are feeling the impact of Amazon's massive distribution system. So how is that going to impact your territory allocation? And then finally, it's not just about your core products and services, but think about marketing and relationships. Franchisees, do you want them actively marketing outside of the territory? And there may be good reason to do that. In many cases, I see franchisors who provide a non-exclusive territory and a designated marketing area. And that designated marketing area may be larger than the actual exclusive or non-exclusive territory in order to draw customers in. But this is another way that you can allocate territory by segmenting out the marketing from the actual transactions taking place. In either case, it's important to be clear. What activities are you allowing the franchisee to do inside the territory and outside their territory? These are important considerations when developing your territory allocation model. Certainly, if this is an area of concern for you, where you've had challenges or that you see challenges on the horizon, feel free to reach out. I would be happy to visit with you about what help I might be able to provide. I certainly would recommend that you schedule a follow-up demonstration for your company with BlastPoint, because I think that you can see the power of this model, the affordability. I know that they have special pricing for franchisors with under 10 units, but as I mentioned, this is a subscription model. You pay one flat fee a month, and you have unlimited access to using the tool. I will caveat that when you're trying to understand your market, there's a lot of data that you should be thinking about. They also have a service where you can provide them access to information and data in your resident systems. They can upload that into their database and use that in your mapping. So, they charge a fee for grabbing that data and uploading it into the system. They can even go through and do the analysis for you as well. But once that data is in there, the ability to go in the tool and with every new franchisee that calls and they're interested in a certain area, to be able to pull that up and plot that out and be able to show them specifically what that area looks like today, what that allocation might look like for their franchise. It makes franchising personal, and it should be. I've said it before, and I'll continue to say it. In franchising, we have institutionalized many things that were meant to be socialized. Franchising is about people, and if we keep it focused on customizing our offer and allocating our territory based on their particular situation, we're going to have a lot more success and a lot more inventory to deal with. So thank you very much for sharing part of your day with us and learning a little bit more about territory allocation and franchising. Would love to entertain some questions.
Yeah, Ben, we have a few questions coming through on the channel. One of them is, when utilizing the BlastPoint platform, some of these I can answer. Does this system have the ability to mine data, or does the user need to provide the data in order to develop the formula? Would you like to answer that? Would you like me to answer that? I think
No, go ahead.
Ben?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so our base system has a large amount of demographic and location linked data already waiting. And then we also have a data concierge service. So when we take on a new customer, part of the onboarding process is identifying data that's really exclusively relevant to their own business model. Sometimes that's competitors, sometimes it's co-locators, sometimes it's something that we haven't encountered before, and data concierge goes on a journey to see if we can locate it somewhere in the universe. Some of the questions coming through in the channel are also about pricing, and I think you should follow up for a demo if that's something that you want to talk about, but we are a subscription as a service model with the option of adding in custom data for an additional cost, which is all laid out pretty clearly when you talk with our CTO, Tomer Bornstein, and I'll give that information in a little bit. One of the questions, Ben, and this is definitely for you, is for a franchisor working a new territory model, coming from zip codes to a new model, how would you prioritize which model may work the best for our company between radius or population or drive time? So this person is asking, if anything is possible about drawing up a new territory and we were coming from zip codes, how should I think about that?
Yeah, great question. And first and foremost, I would say, think of territory allocation as a formula. And the reason I say that is things are changing so rapidly. There's not a one size fits all. Zip code, you may give somebody a little too much, somebody else not quite enough. I have a franchisor that dealing with now that has a franchisee, that wants to sell part of their territory and they need to split a zip code. The territory is based on zip codes, it becomes difficult. So I would say going forward, the best territory allocation is thinking about it from a formula perspective. How many customers does it take? What kind of customers? How much time does it take to and from, whether it's service or customers coming to the location? I would say if you can build a formula that can be acid tested through plugging it into a product like BlastPoint, because you can field test it. You build the territory formula based on what you think, and then you apply it to existing franchisees, and it's going to tell you whether they're fully utilizing it, whether they're getting the result, whether they're underperforming, and you will be able to zero in on a very powerful model that you can use going forward. And it'll self-correct because, the inputs to the formula are going to evolve over time as you have better data. So I wouldn't try to use any one denominator for territory allocation. I would focus on building a formula that accurately reflects the results that you want.
Ben, another question to toss out for you is, I wonder if you could talk just a little bit more about a concept that came up in this talk, and it was so interesting to me. It's the first time I've heard anyone talk about this, and I hope you're talking about this frequently everywhere you go. But you started talking about taking an approach to territories that's really similar to the way right now a lot of people in the marketing industry approach customers. You talked about territory segmentation. Could you spend a little bit more time on that and really flesh that out?
Yeah, this is, some people are finding themselves, kind of backing into it. For example, if you have a successful single unit franchise offer, sometimes over time you'll end up with some big multi-unit operators who are just either opening more units or acquiring other franchisees. And, those big multi-units, they'll begin to start thinking like a regional developer or area developer. And so notionally in the U.S. at least, and I don't know if we have any international, because predominantly international is master franchise, but that also is going through a bit of a change. But in the U.S., the choices are, fairly limited. I mean, you have a single unit franchise, which is, one location, one owner. And the service side, it would be the same as an owner operator, a franchisee that's going to own and operate the model. And from there, then you go to multi-unit, meaning more than one physical location or additional territory to expand for the service side. After that, then you begin to get into what I refer to as area developer, where you're granting a geography to one entity that is going to agree to develop that market over time. And that could be the number of units open, number of customers captured, the amount of revenue generated. It could be any type of goal that you want to set for that, but the developer has a goal they must meet, so that you can hold them accountable to their performance. There's also what's called area representative, which is a franchise model of allowing someone else, a franchisee, to solicit franchises on behalf of the franchisor. So it's a type of marketing franchise, if you will. Sometimes the area representative owns and operates one or more units. Sometimes they don't open or operate any units. Sometimes they provide support services as well as franchise solicitation services. And then in my nomenclature, when you combine an area representative model with an area representative model, I call it a regional developer. And so they're going to open and operate in a geographic area following a performance metric, but they are also going to be actively soliciting independent franchisees to operate in that market as well. Think of that as as pouring gas on the fire. You're not limited now by the capital that the area developer has, because now you have supplemental capital being brought in through the individual franchisees that are going to go into that market. So, and there's combinations of these models at work. And so there's no one size fits all. It's critical to sit down and think about, in Chicago, what is the optimal way to build my brand as a franchisor? And it's likely going to require multiple tiers of franchises, and it's going to require a very sophisticated territory allocation model, among other things that are going to be needed.
I think we have one more question that we can take right now, Ben. One more just
okay.
In.
All right.
Here goes. For a non-data driven franchisor, other than financials, location, open date, and other basic details, how would you approach what are the top 5 data points to capture in order to help build a strong predictive model? That's a great question. Ben, what do you have to say? And then I can tell you what I advise people.
Sure. Yeah, I'd have to understand non-data driven franchisor, because franchisors are in data-rich environments. Every customer transaction, regardless of what the type of business model is, generates, who is that customer? How far did they come? What's their socioeconomic status? What kind of car do they drive? Whoever the customer is, the deeper you dive into understanding that customer, the more likely you're going to be able to figure out where more of them reside. And so, when you talk about predictive models or formulas for territory allocation, I typically start with who is the customer. And what I want to find out is, how can I identify where more of them are, which will drive my marketing. It's going to drive most of the other decisions I'm going to need to make about my business. But certainly on allocating, what every franchisee wants to know is that you've given me a reasonable territory to have a good return on my investment.
So I would just affirm everything you've just described, Ben, and also say that one of the things I've seen our customers succeed in is the ability to take the gut level knowledge they already have about their businesses and pull on the data sets that we're holding in our platform. You could do this with other location analytics tools as well, but pull on the data that we're already holding, knowing what you do already know about your business. Let's say you haven't been collecting data yet. Let's say you haven't figured that out, but this is partly why I used the childcare franchise example earlier, but you know that your model is a childcare franchise. You literally only serve people from age 0 to age 12 and their families. That's a data point. You know who your customers are. You know more than you think you know, and having access to location analytics tools allows you to also take, while you're building up your data-driven model for by formula territory allocation. Location analytics tools also allow you to take your gut level experience and knowledge and put them to use right away. They allow you to start where you are and continue in that mindset that Ben was talking about of learning and adaptation. And I actually feel like I've watched people in our tool learn more about their customers more rapidly because they had access to a visual interface that's really readable, friendly, and easy to work with. So that's what I would add. And we're coming towards the end. Ben, do you have any final thoughts? Anything else you want to add in before we wrap up?
No, I just say thanks to everyone for taking an hour out of your day to learn more about territory allocation and blast point. And if it can be of help, certainly be in touch. I know that Emily will be in touch, and I'd encourage you to look into this and see how it might help you do a better job of protecting your inventory and maximizing the value of building your brand as you go forth. But I hope you have a great day, and thank you for joining us.
Yep. Thank you so much for being here. If you do want to get in touch with us, you can contact our CTO and co-founder, Tomer Bornstein. We're a minute over time. So Ben, thank you so much for doing this with us. I learned so much. I'm sure everyone else did as well. I have so many more questions, but it's time. Hope everyone has a beautiful Tuesday. And we will try to get Ben back to talk about territory allocation models.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Ben. Bye all.